Welcome. If you're listening to this, chances are you care about staying active, or you've had a recent reminder of how quickly that can change, often due to pain. Most people don't see it coming. They're coping, carrying on, and doing what they've always done, until one ordinary moment becomes one step too far.
Welcome to the 3 Rules to Stay Active for Life. I'm Gavin Routledge, a lifestyle medicine professional, osteopath and author. And in this podcast, I'll share a few simple frameworks to help you suffer less pain and feel more confident about your current and future health.
Sitting is the new smoking. You've probably heard that phrase before, but I don't actually think sitting itself is the biggest problem. I don't think this seated position is fundamentally bad for you. What is the problem then with sitting? It's uninterrupted sitting that's the problem. Because when you stay still for too long, 2 things, or probably many other things, but 2 things in particular start happening quietly in the background. 1, your body starts to experience sustained loading and all the impacts of that. And 2, it becomes less healthy metabolically. But let's start with sustained loading and its relationship with pain. So, what do I mean by sustained loading? I simply mean staying in one position for a prolonged period of time. Now that could be half an hour, it could be an hour, it could be longer. Fundamentally, if you stay in that same position, you are loading your tissues in the same way for a prolonged period. Sustained loading. And gradually over time, the tissues that are holding you up, and that may be actively or passively, muscles, ligaments, tendons, they just slowly will get fatigued. Let's assume you sit for a long time and your back gets a little sore, your neck gets a little tense. When you get up out of the chair, oh dear, I sort of seized up a little bit. These are the effects of sustained loading. So those tissues are slowly fatiguing. And a classic thing we see a lot in the clinic, as you probably know, I in particular specialise in lower back pain and sciatica. About 80% of the people we see in clinic who have low back pain or sciatica are what we call flexion intolerant, so they don't like being in a slightly bent forward position. What happens when you sit in a chair? Most people's lower backs go into a slightly bent forward position and they get tired and sore very often. They get fatigued. So your body tolerates load badly when it's been still for too long. Why does pain often appear when you stand up? Because things have kind of tightened up. Maybe you've got a little bit of background inflammation. So let's say you've got a dodgy hip joint, a little bit of osteoarthritis. That inflammation, or a knee osteoarthritis, that inflammation will slowly build up while you stay still. So when you go to move, a little bit sore, takes you a few steps to get moving. So that's the classic, standing up from a chair. It could be getting out of a car, getting up off the sofa. And then very commonly what happens is, of course, you've been sitting for a while, you might feel absolutely fine when you sit, you get up, still don't feel too bad, but then you bend over to pick something up off the floor and wham! Sudden spasm in the back, or your hip gives way, the knee gives way, and that's because you've combined that sustained loading with a more strenuous movement. Bending over for some people is a lot of load, depending on what you're picking up off the floor. So you blame the bending over or the tying the shoelaces or whatever, but actually it was the sitting for a prolonged period before that pushed you gradually closer to the edge. So that final movement often gets blamed for a problem that's been building up quietly because of the sustained loading. Also, of course, what happens if you stay still for a long period of time, your nervous system almost kind of goes to sleep. It's a bit like leaving a car parked for too long. Things feel a bit stiff and sticky when you first try to move again. Might be a little bit difficult to get the car fired up. Same with your body. Now, The other element I wanted to talk about was the impact of sustained sitting on your metabolic health. And what do I mean by that? Well, your metabolism, there's lots of physiological processes that go on in the background in your body, repair mechanisms, building mechanisms. All of these things are related to your metabolism. And when you sit for a prolonged period, it's a little bit like lying down. Your metabolism slows down. Muscle activity drops, your glucose uptake worsens. What do I mean by that? Well, glucose is one of the main, if not the main, blocks of energy that we have available to us. And we have to get that glucose into the cells in your body, especially your muscles, in order for them to do the work. And when you sit still for a long time, your glucose uptake slows down. So you don't get the energy into the cells. And well, one thing is you can often feel a bit drowsy and tired because your glucose uptake worsens. So your blood sugar rises and you can feel a bit drowsy. Circulation slows down when you've been sitting for a while. Your calorie burn drops. And we know that if you sit for more than half an hour, roughly, your metabolic rate drops to roughly the equivalent to when you're actually lying down. So your metabolism really downregulates when you sit. And the consequences of that, of course, can be weight gain, insulin resistance. That's insulin is the thing that helps get the glucose into the cells, so you become insulin resistant. Your fitness levels decline. You just basically have less energy. You recover more slowly from assaults, whether they be infections or injuries. And you're more prone to inflammation, interestingly. So using your muscles strenuously produces things called myokines, and they help to drive down inflammation. So the longer you sit, the more likely you are to become inflamed. And this is why the cliff of pain is also the cliff of health. So if you sit less, or rather, if you sit more, you have less movement, and your capacity is slowly declining, and that makes movement harder, and the harder movement becomes, the less inclined you are to do it. Nasty, vicious circle. So, now that reminds me of, and it should remind you as well of, use it or lose it, but don't abuse it. Yeah, remember that first rule? It's vitally important to keep moving often. So use it or lose it. Yeah, you'll seize up if you don't use it. Sitting all day, you are slowly losing capacity. Okay. Now, in terms of what's the solution to this? Interrupt sittings. We're not saying you can't sit, but interrupt it more often. You don't have to necessarily have a total of less sitting, although that might be good for you, but just make sure you're breaking up your sitting more often. Now, if you're like me, I've been a committed sit-stand desk user for at least 25 years, so I tend to do more standing than sitting. But the other thing is just set a timer. You know, if you've got a smart watch that nudges you to get up, don't ignore it. Get up, move around. Doesn't have to be a lot, although, hey, if you could, it'd be fabulous if you could do 10 squats every time you got up from sitting or more. More movement variability is the key. Yeah, so move in different ways. Swing your arms around, dance around the room. Moving often is the antidote to sedentary periods. So, the line here is the problem isn't sitting, it's staying in that seated position. And there is an old maxim, your best posture is your next posture. Yeah? So don't stay still. Now, of course, way back in episode 3 or 4, I think it was, I talked about active Xing. Active Xing is the antidote to the seated posture. You stay sitting for prolonged periods of time. Certain muscle groups tend to tighten over time, but active Xing is the antidote to that. It's also a great calorie burner, gets your whole, what we call posterior chain, all the muscles down the back of you working really hard. So go back to episode 3 or 4, remind yourself about active Xing. So, brief recap. Movement reactivates your muscles, improves circulation, improves glucose regulation, down, keeps your energy levels up, make sure you're not loading particular tissues in a sustained way so they're not going to fatigue and get painful, and it makes sure that your nervous system is happy. So tiny movements repeated frequently can have surprisingly large effects over time. Okay, I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
If today's episode sparked a shift in how you think about your body or your health, don't try to change everything at once. Choose one small action this week, something that nudges you towards staying active rather than avoiding discomfort. That's how confidence is rebuilt. You'll find further episodes exploring the 3 rules and the habits that matter most, not by doing more, but by doing things better. This programme is provided for general information only and should not be taken as medical advice. If you have persistent or worsening symptoms, please seek appropriate medical guidance.